First here at 5, a big shakeup in the race for Oregon's next governor. Democratic candidate and former New York Times columnist Kristof is disqualified. Officials say he doesn't meet the state's residency requirement. Maggie Vespa joins us now. Maggie, the Secretary of State says this wasn't even close, not even a close call.
Yeah, Laurel, exactly. She says for the last few years, Kristof has, quote, clearly been living as a New Yorker, not as an Oregonian. And that, she says, disqualifies him from the race. In order to run for governor, a person has to have been a resident of Oregon for at least 3 years leading up to the election. That's written into our state's constitution. Now, Kristof is from Oregon. He owns property in Yamhill County. He also says he visits here often, and he calls this state his home. But today, Secretary of State Shemia Fagan said his case was not strong enough. Among her key points, Kristof voted in New York, not in Oregon, in 2020, and she said he failed to provide documentation proving he paid income taxes in Oregon in 2019 or 2020.
My top priority is building trust with Oregonians. And we build trust by applying the same rules to everybody. The same rules to someone famous as to someone who's not. The same rules to someone in my political party as someone who's not.
All of us here, we all know that Oregon can do better. The political establishment doesn't want to hear that. I guess I can't blame them. They've been in power for years, and they don't really have anything new to say.
So Kristof at that news conference today vowed to appeal this in court, and they'll have to work fast. State officials have to start printing ballots for the primary in March. And Laurel, of course, you know, he's one of dozens running for that office. And so far, no word on this from his opponents on today's ruling.
Thank you, Maggie. There is some news about one of those opponents in the race for governor. Democratic candidate Tina Kotek is stepping down from her role as Oregon House Speaker. Since she's running for governor, the upcoming legislative session would have been her last as Speaker. Her final day now will be January 21st. She is considered one of the front runners for governor. Oregon's 2022 legislative session starts February 1st. Today marks the 1-year anniversary since the attempted takeover of the U.S. Capitol. But 2 weeks before that, others tried to take over Oregon's state capitol. It happened December 21st. Conservatives who were angry over COVID restrictions and lockdowns tried to get into the building, which was closed to the public. Lawmakers were holding a one-day special session. Senate President Peter Courtney said both events revealed the anger by some towards government leaders, an anger which has not faded.
Oh, it's just as bad. I don't think anything simmered down at all. I mean, it's yeah. I don't sense the meanness and the hatred and the refusal to deal with people that you don't like or care for. I mean, I don't think any of that simmered down its own. I think it's actually some ways gotten worse.
Courtney said as a result, the Capitol building will have metal detectors for the first time ever when the legislature meets in February. 8 people from Oregon and Southwest Washington are among the more than 700 defendants who've been charged so far in relation to the U.S. Capitol riot. They include 2 brothers, a 63-year-old accused of assaulting an officer, and a father and son duo from Battleground. So where do those cases stand? Here's Kylie Boshi. Kyle?
Well, none of the defendants from Oregon or Southwest Washington appear anxious to resolve their cases. Court records indicate there's been little cooperation from those involved. Instead, their charges are almost entirely based on evidence gathered from social media, along with tips from family members and acquaintances. The FBI used surveillance and body-worn camera footage to help identify a 63-year-old Hillsborough man. Reed Christensen is facing multiple charges in connection with the takeover of the Capitol after allegedly striking and pushing officers. The U.S. Army veteran and former Intel employee is scheduled to appear in federal court for arraignment by Zoom later this month. Another case with local ties involves Jeff Grace of Battleground and his son Jeremy Grace, seen in photos posing together inside the Capitol. They're both facing federal charges. In March, we interviewed the father. The Anti-Defamation League's Center on Extremism says the threat of prison time clearly has not silenced far-right extremists.
The repercussions of January 6th were enormous, and one would have felt that that would have dissuaded the bad actors from continuing along in that trajectory. And yet we've seen in some ways extremists become emboldened. We've seen extremist ideology become mainstreamed.
Coming up on the story at 6 o'clock, we'll break down all the cases with a local connection and speak with a legal expert about how long it will take for these cases to be resolved.
Thank you, Kyle. NBC Nightly News will also have extensive coverage of the Capitol attack tonight. That includes some of the most powerful images to come out of that day. You may remember pictures of Representative Andy Kim cleaning up trash and debris inside the rotunda. Tonight, he reflects on those moments from a year ago.
I knew that day, I knew on January 6th that this would not be a healing moment for our country, and it saddened me tremendously. What I didn't fully internalize is that it would actually be weaponized to make us even more divided. And we now don't have a shared truth about January 6th. We're losing touch with the shared truth about our country and our country's story. And that's ultimately, I think, the legacy of January 6th.
You can watch more of the interview with Representative Kim on NBC Nightly News coming up at 5:30 right after this newscast. In the pandemic, Oregon once again shattered its record for new daily COVID cases. It reported 7,615 cases today. The previous record, 6,203, was set yesterday. This graph shows the daily numbers, and you can see a massive spike recently. Hospitalizations are also rising. There are 588 COVID patients in Oregon, up from 523 yesterday. 110 of them are in the ICU. This comes as the highly infectious Omicron variant spreads around the world. And that variant has local health leaders warning us about what the immediate future in the pandemic will look like. Dr. Jennifer Vines from Multnomah County says she's confident all of us will feel the squeeze of the spread. And most of us, she says, will actually contract Omicron, but experience mild to no symptoms. And Dr. Vines believes some of us will get severely ill. All of this is taking quite a toll on our health system.
It is cause for concern, given that our hospitals and health systems are already under intense strain. And by that, I mean EMS calls are up 40% over a usual average volume, and at least one Portland Metro emergency department, a large emergency department, was physically out of space at one point yesterday afternoon.
Health officials say it's important to get vaccinated and boosted if you haven't already. Wear tight-fitted masks and avoid large gatherings. Both Oregon and Washington are expanding eligibility for Pfizer's COVID vaccine booster. It now includes kids 12 and older, based on updated guidance from the CDC released yesterday. Eligibility for the Pfizer booster depends on which vaccine was received for the initial vaccination series. Those 12 and older should get the Pfizer booster at least 5 months after getting both Pfizer shots, and 6 months after getting both Moderna shots, or 2 months after getting the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Headaches for people trying to travel in the Columbia River Gorge, and that's due to landslides closing roads, including Interstate 84. In fact, I-84 was shut down in both directions today. Tim Gordon is live for us in Troutdale. Tim, what's the latest on those closures?
Well, Laurel, westbound lanes of 84 reopened about 3 hours ago, but the eastbound lanes are still closed between here and Troutdale and Cascade Locks. The snow and ice has turned to rain and runoff in the western end of the gorge, and with that, landslides. The biggest you can see from Sky 8, coming down a few miles west of Cascade Locks, across Old Historic Highway 30 and spilling onto I-84.
It's very wet with all the water we've been having in there, a lot of rocks, a lot of water coming down the hillsides in there.
Don Hamilton told us late Thursday morning that ODOT geologists needed to check that the slide area was stable. This is within the Eagle Creek fire zone from 4 years ago that left lots of loose debris behind.
They got to make sure there's not more material coming down the hill. They got to make sure that they're safe before we can get in there to clean the road.
And so the backup was on in Troutdale, with a lot of big rigs parked, waiting to get through. And there were other closures.
You can't get east from here. Everything's closed.
This was up on Old Highway 30 and Larch Mountain Road. There were slides downhill from here, and so ODOT and Oregon State Police were turning people back to keep them safe.
We've got several landslides on Historic 30, and so it's completely impassable. We've already had some emergency service vehicles get trapped. They go in looking for people, and then a slide happens behind them and they can't get back out, and so it's happening that quick.
Back along I-84, crews were able to get to cleanup Thursday afternoon, but ODOT was still unable to estimate when this section of interstate would reopen. There's no taking chances.
We had a deadly slide in here. A woman very sadly and tragically died in this area from a slide.
We were reminded today of a landslide in January of last year that came down in the same area and took the life of 50-year-old Jennifer Moore of Warrendale, who was trapped and buried in her car. So these slides are obviously very dangerous and they can get you. So important to check those weather alerts and emergency alerts and also trip check before you travel. Laurel?
Thank you, Tim.